Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld. Kimberly Guilfoyle, Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, and she once played charades with a cricket. Dana Perino, The Five. So, Sarah Huckabee Sanders was refused service at a restaurant. You may have heard about it. It was a mean thing to do, but in the new era where mean girls rule, some mean girls think it's a plus. Washington Post Jennifer Rubin wrote a piece on the lost art of shunning, in which she feels for the restaurant owner. But Jennifer, shunning's not a lost art. It was once used to ostracize people for religious reasons. It's extremism. But Jennifer hates Trump and everyone linked to him, so maybe extremism is warranted, right? Meanwhile, Maxine Waters wants more than just shunning.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
You are not welcome at this gasoline station. So where will this end? Well, we saw how it started.
If you vote for Trump, then you, the voter, you, not Donald Trump, are standing at the border like Nazis going, you here. And I think we now have to flip it. And it's a given the evilness of Donald Trump. But if you vote, you can no longer separate yourself.
Oh, what a dope. Why is the guy yelling Nazi often best at imitating one? He just branded millions of people, which opens doors to anything, and shunning is the least of it. Harassment, name-calling, violence, or coming right to your home to terrify your family.
Free the kids! Free the kids! Free the kids! Free the kids! Shame! 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 Shame!
So, what if shunning went both ways? What if cops ignored 911 calls because of politics? Who do you think the police supports more anyway? Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump? It's an easy guess. But the police would never, ever do that because they know what it means to serve the public. What's as bad as shunning? How about desiring a person's presence only as hired help? When pondering this new tribalism among restaurants, leftist Matthew Iglesias snarked, who is going to cook at Republican-only restaurants? Thank you, Maddie. Now we know the real reason liberals love Mexicans and Hondurans. They expect them to vote their way, but only after their shift's over in the kitchen. All right, Dana, should Maxine walk it back? I have a feeling she's not going to walk it back.
I don't think she's going to, but Nancy Pelosi tried to.
Right.
So she tweeted that that's unacceptable, and that she wants to make America beautiful again. And she did take a moment to say, like, this is that people are reacting to something, meaning Trump, but she was not for the incivility. But Maxine Waters, certainly not. It's because everything is national news now.
Yeah.
Maxine Waters, years ago, in her district, it wouldn't have been front page news everywhere. But now you do run the risk that somebody like Maxine Waters paints everybody in the Democratic Party with a broad brush. But what she's discussing is something super unhealthy. It is obnoxious. And what I'm concerned about is for people who think this is good, what happens then if somebody feels cornered? Like, we are creatures that want to survive. If you feel cornered, you will fight back.
Right.
And this could escalate very quickly.
Yeah. You know, Juan, I'm torn about the restaurant thing because I'm a libertarian, and I feel like you should, if you don't want somebody at your restaurant, is that more of an accepted practice because that stance is no longer tethered to causing hardship? It's not like the 60s. So if I say you can't come in here, that might be the only restaurant in town. So is this more acceptable because it's not as hard to find another place to go? Do you follow me?
No, I didn't, but I'm trying. So, but were you suggesting like in the 60s this was over race?
Yeah, well, and also it created a real hardship. But these days, she could go to another restaurant. I'm just wondering.
Oh, for a black person in the 60s, maybe there was another restaurant available. Well,
yeah, that's my point. Yeah,
certainly there were black restaurants you could go to. So, but that's a different story in the sense that there's a tremendous and sad history in terms of race and exclusion. I don't think, even President Trump wouldn't say there's any history of Trump supporters being excluded from restaurants.
Yeah, I get. No, what I'm saying is it okay now because there are so many other options in general for people that if you say, I don't want you in my restaurant, you can go somewhere else. That's the point I'm making.
You know, I don't think it was the right thing to do. And I would pick up on what Dana said. I think Nancy Pelosi said it. The Washington Post said it. Editorial board. David Axelrod, who was Obama's chief political strategist, said the same thing. Axelrod put it in these terms. He said, you know, Trump has really been rough in terms of his use of language and a lot of the kind of things he's encouraged his supporters to do. But it's not a reason, it doesn't justify then being a lack of civility or rudeness to people who you have a different point of agreement, a point of disagreement with. That it will just lead us all down the road to hell here, where we reduce ourselves to tribalism, and we're shouting and screaming at each other and breaking apart our common bonds as Americans. I just don't think it's good.
Yeah. You know, speaking of tribalism and Trump, Jesse, I do think there's a difference between Trump and this in the sense that his whatever you call that thing he did was directed at other Republicans for the longest time. It wasn't an ideological origin, right?
Yes, I don't see the similarity
legal
with
to
the restaurant
ban
thing. And like you said, you're a
restaurant.
libertarian, so maybe it's illegal to ban someone you don't like from the restaurant. Doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
But I think this behavior just plays into Donald Trump's hands. Remember the last couple years under the Obama administration, you had Antifa, you had racial riots, you had open borders, chaos, even before you had Occupy Wall Street. President Trump was elected to clean up that kind of mess. And the American people fundamentally are decent people. They want other people to be respected, and they're not going to tolerate kind of rageaholics disrupting law-abiding Americans from having dinner. And I believe it starts with the left and the media's demonization of Republicans. If you spend a year and a half saying Donald Trump, his cabinet, and the 60 million Americans who voted for him are Nazis, that is going to incite people to treat people like Nazis and yell at them and harass them and put their lives at danger. And the Nazi comparison is lazy, historically inaccurate, and it means they've lost the argument. So I believe this is happening because Trump is winning, not losing, and this is driving the left crazy. He's securing the borders, and that is a threat to the left. They can't handle it. They're not acting like they're going to win in November. They're frantic, and they're acting like they're desperate because this is all they have left. And if he succeeds and he is reelected, they have nothing. So you have the people like Peter Fonda, you have Maxine Waters, Kathy Griffin. They are literally melting down before our eyes, and there's no one in the Democratic Party that can control them, and it's just helping Donald Trump succeed. And his numbers are at record high right now.
Hey, Kimberly, Charles Krauthammer just passed away. He had a phrase that we all remember, which was, as a conservative, we think they are wrong, but the left thinks we're evil.
Yeah.
And I think this is the problem, is that if they think that you're evil, they can do anything to you. If they think you're a Nazi, then morally, they are right to go after you.
Right. It justifies the level of vitriol and, the rhetoric that is just so, repugnant to attack people or someone's family, to be able to say to somebody, you can't eat here at this restaurant, yet they fight for the cases for even, like, say, gay rights to be able to have a wedding cake made or something of that nature. So there's a real, hypocrisy latent in there. But if they feel justified, like with the Antifa and others that say, well, we're fighting against evil, against something like the devil, then they say they're justified in doing it morally and ethically. So therefore, anything goes. Like somebody like Maxine Waters calling for this, or calling to put, a child in a cage with pedophiles, making personal attacks against families, or increasing sort of the level of rhetoric and hate to say, go after them personally. I mean, can you imagine Sarah Sanders or her family going into a restaurant and you could tell somebody you can't eat there? I mean, this is so far like going back, in time. This isn't moving forward in terms of civility of discourse and disagreeing with somebody versus, hating their guts and saying, I can do anything to you, whether it's rhetoric or whether it's physical violence, to justify my cause because of, who you are and what you stand for.
But I don't think, let me just say, I don't think this started before. I think a lot of this is out of Trump's rhetoric and the way that Trump speaks and Trump policies. And so I didn't see this happening under Obama. I don't remember this happening even when there was anger, remember George W. Bush about not finding weapons of mass destruction and crude things about blood flow. But I don't remember this kind of acting out on either side. But what you have now is I think, people focusing on this and not on the policy. And a lot of people, in fact, most Americans don't like separating children from parents. And that's what all this is about.
Well, they could have solved that problem, but crying Chuck Schumer refused to act in the Senate and did nothing about it and waited until it became a hot-button issue to hurt President Trump.
Sure,
and
Jesse,
I don't think it's fair to criticize Donald Trump for people treating the people that work for him like animals. That's not right.
Donald
It's not
Trump treating the people that work for him.
No, when people protest Sarah Huckabee Sanders, you can't blame that on Donald Trump, which you just did. I think that's unfair, and that's on them. That is on them. That is not on Donald Trump.
If you go to a Donald Trump rally and Donald Trump is standing up there and saying, "I'll pay legal fees if any of you want to beat up some of these people," I mean, what is going on?
We all know now that the people swinging were paid protesters.
How about
from the DNC?
Trump? Donald Trump saying, "Oh, if Hillary Clinton is elected and appoints a Supreme Court judge who does anything to your gun rights, well, I guess you Second Amendment people have to take." I mean, come on.
But there hasn't been examples of radical, violent, and hateful Trump supporters disrespecting people in public places like restaurants, like is happening on the other side.
Oh, what do you call that lady getting run over a year ago in Charlottesville, Jesse?
I think that
I wouldn't blame Donald Trump for that. I would blame that individual for that.
I see. Very interesting. The problem is, how do you blame the restaurant owner? Nobody in the Democratic Party told the restaurant owner what to do.
Wait a second. The people on the Democratic Party have been calling Trump a Nazi and saying, and like Maxine Waters saying, I encourage you to go call people out to their face and refuse them service.
I think we can. I
blame her.
I think the whataboutism thing can go on forever. You can go from Charlottesville. You can go back to Scalise, Kathy Giffords. You can go back to protesters calling Vietnam vets baby killers. You can go as far back as that. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't help. Coming up, former DHS Secretary Jeh Johnson kills the latest liberal talking point with his new comments about the Obama administration's migrant detainment policy. Plus, our 23andMe results are finally here. What a surprise.
I ain't got you, and you're just my kind. I need a little girl to ease my troubled mind. To ease my troubled mind.
Maybe we should make it.
A stunning admission coming from former Obama DHS Chief Jeh Johnson, telling our very own Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday that the Obama administration embraced many of the same policies that President Trump is currently being criticized for.
We expanded family detention. We had then 34,000 beds for family detention, only 95 of 34,000 equipped to deal with families. So we expanded it. I freely admit it was controversial. We believed it was necessary at the time. I still believe it is necessary to maintain a certain capability for families. We can't have catch and release. And in my 3 years, we deported or repatriated or returned over 1 million people.
The president also doubling down on his attacks against Democrats on immigration.
We want to have a great immigration. What we have is very simple. We want strong borders and we want no crime. The Democrats want open borders, and they don't care about crime.
All right, Dana, we were talking about the communication just a second ago, listening to that.
Well, I think like the president today, when he said strong borders, no crime, they want open borders and more crime. Like, so he's defining the issue on his terms. He has the bully pulpit, and it'll be effective, and the Democrats will have to try to counter that, and I'm sure that they will. And so from that communication standpoint, I think very good. I also think, though, that even though it is true that the previous administration had the separation policy as well, Jeh Johnson being very honest, saying we can't have catch and release, that doesn't make sense. But I think that we have to explain that the White House should have explained all of this before. They didn't have a plan to do that. Then, when they do the zero tolerance policy, the scale of how many families were going to be separated went zoop like this. And then they're like, but Obama did it too. And it's like, well, no, that's not. Yes, but you have to talk about the scale of it. And now the president, and we talked about in the previous segment, I didn't have a chance to say that actually you can get the president to change his mind. Yes. And the president did that last week. He said, okay, fine, we're going to take this back, try a different executive order, but you have to work with me on something else. And so if people were willing to come to the table, there is a path forward to get this done. And I think it is really necessary because not only do you have this separation issue, and now Customs and Border Patrol not referring for prosecution, but a confusion there with the Justice Department. It is not locked down and solid yet, and then the reunification issue is going to dog them for a while. So I think on the communications standpoint for defining the issue, defining his opponents, excellent. But on this communication issue going forward, they're not done yet on the family separation issue.
Yes, and then McCall was on as well, talking about a way and a path forward for citizenship.
Yeah, he's a great guy to work with.
Yeah, he's a quite reasonable individual. He's able to cross, party lines and work in a bipartisan fashion, which could also be persuasive to different factions. Greg, what do you think of the president's messaging here? He's a master of simplifying, the message and getting that out there, whether it's build the wall or saying, we want borders and less crime, no crime.
I think the other arena he could tackle is the effect on the economy and talk about the economy and jobs. I think there are a lot of people like Mickey Kaus who have a lot of good data on and it's something that is less emotional than this other stuff. And it affects everybody who's, if you want to have a strong economy and jobs. There's data that shows that that's negatively affected by uncontrolled immigration. This issue is not new. There were, I don't know how many thousands of kids unaccompanied that came into the country under Obama. I don't know.
2014 was a lot.
It was like between 90 and 120,000, something like that. So the only different variable in this outrage is who was in office. So I said this on Friday or Thursday. You have to thank Donald Trump for making this issue front and center, because no liberal, no leftist, no media hack would have cared. If it was Hillary, they never would have talked about this, because then that would have hurt Hillary. There's this, when the Dems are in power, the media ignores issues of compassion because they think they got it. But if a Republican is, they hold their feet to the fire, which is why, good news, it's being addressed because Trump's addressing it.
All right, Jesse. So, the president obviously frustrated at being, demonized and back and forth on both sides. But everybody wants to come to an amenable solution as it relates to immigration. And it's not something that's unique to this administration. So many others have tried to do so as well.
It's tough. I mean, immigration is probably the most divisive thing we have in the country right now. But the president's winning on the issue. His numbers have actually climbed since this controversy started coming up. And now 75% of Americans support incarceration and deportation. That is the president's plan. Only 20% support the Democrats' plan of catch and release. That's a CBS poll. And a majority of Americans, for the first time, believe that a wall should be built all along the southern border. So the movement of the country is going in the president's direction because the country believes in the law and the country believes in borders. We're a compassionate nation, but we're also fair. And it's a national security situation and an economic security situation. People understand that, and that's why he was elected.
All right. So, Juan, the president trying to make inroads here and address all of the concerns, and obviously putting the concerns of national security, safety, public safety, border security, and upholding the law, which is his job as commander-in-chief, to make sure that we are secure as a country while still being compassionate.
I think he's stirring up an issue for the midterms. I don't think that any of those issues are on the table. It's not a national security issue at the moment. We have a border. We have a 70-year low in terms of people crossing that border illegally. We've had a recent upsurge, I think, in the last 2 or 3 months, even as he was pursuing this family separation policy. So we know that's not what it's about. It's not about illegal drugs, which come through legal ports. I think this is an issue which fires up his base, in which he has decided. He says the Democrats like this issue. He says, you know what? He likes this issue for the midterms. I would just point out to you, to me, the craziest thing that happened over the weekend was the president saying, no more, why do we need courts? Why do we need judges for these immigrants? Just throw them out. As if people who are fleeing violence in Guatemala or El Salvador, or the gangs that he always talks about, have no legitimate reason to say, hey, this is America.
Well,
we believe in asylum.
Go to the port of entry, Juan.
But I'm just telling you, and by the way, on the thing that Jay Johnson was talking about, we have had under the Obama administration an effort not to simply catch and release. So they expanded the number of beds available to families for people who came with families. That's wholly different than what the President Trump is doing. He established a new policy to separate families from children.
He's saying follow the laws, go to the point of entry. We have laws on the books about how to become a citizen of the United States that should be observed equally and uniformly. Next up, more evidence Democrats need to work harder to win back seats in November.
Have to wait so long, and would
Is the Trump bump real? More positive numbers rolling in for the president. A CNBC poll shows for the first time a majority of Americans approve of Mr. Trump's handling of the economy. And after hitting a high with a 45% approval rating from Gallup last week, Trump has gone back down now at a 41% approval rating this week. At 41%, he's up about 2 percentage points from the average of his entire term. And Democrats' generic ballot, well, their midterm edge has slid again, this time to just 4% in a new CBS News poll. Jesse, what do you make of all this?
Before we get to this poll, I can't resist bringing up another poll by Quinnipiac. President Obama named worst president since World War II. I cannot let that slide. Let that sink in. Americans believe President Obama, worst president since World War II. The best presidents were Reagan, Bill Clinton, and JFK. Again, President Obama, worst since World War II.
Dana started coughing over there.
Okay, well, it's just the poll, just one poll.
He can't let it slide by.
Missing.
Yes, where's Bush?
I'm not so sure. We'll see. But anyway, I think this is all economically driven.
Right.
And 51% now say the economy is good or excellent. That is a record in a CNBC poll. And at this point in the Trump presidency, it finally feels like the country and the people are getting comfortable and used to having him be president. In the beginning, it was chaotic with the tweets and a lot of the chaos and the personnel. But the American people have now settled in and understand what this president's all about. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be ridiculous tweeting and commentary. But the economy is, the engine of the economy is ripping right now. People see it in their paychecks. It's clear. And that's what matters to most Americans, safety and prosperity.
So, Dana, just to speak about the economy, because I think that Jesse's right, the numbers go up. Like after the North Korea summit, we saw his numbers go up. This week after the problems at the border with the kids, the numbers gone down a little bit. But remember, I think it was, the idea was that in the midterms, the tax message was going to carry Republicans. The recent poll showed only 34% of Americans say they've seen an increase in income due to the tax cuts.
Well, that's why I do think that's why that the president is focusing on immigration as the issue, because tax cuts, it's good, the economy is good, but people are not jazzed up about it. They don't get energized about it. Remember, the president actually won election with a slightly lower approval rating, even with the lower one that you mentioned. So I think that's okay. But I think the Republicans have a good case, especially to be made in the Senate, with quality candidates. Very good candidates. But the Democrats on the House side, in very key races, they have found really good people to run as well. Moderate Democrats that are targeted specifically for that district, and they're running very local races and avoiding the noise.
Greg?
54% of Americans think the economy is good and excellent, good or excellent. Another survey had 67%. Very or somewhat good economy. The only conclusion, obviously, as they are Nazis, I think. You know, I find the media, the reason why this, the media is having a hard time with this is because they only weigh one variable. They are single variable thinkers, and that variable is always a divisive issue like race or immigration. They don't look at the economy, North Korea, terror, jobs, or the Supreme Court. So all of this era of peaceful prosperity just hits them in the face because they're only looking at one variable. That's the thing that makes them really mad. We're learning from Americans that you don't have to like the doctor to get his competency. Yeah. Bedside manner often is the result of the daily practice of giving bad news because you're a terrible doctor. Obama had amazing bedside manner. Trump doesn't need it.
So
Kimberly, let's pick up on the economy because everybody's talking about this. So we've seen the stock market have a little trouble the last couple of days, apparently tied to the possibility of a trade war and numbers, the tariffs going up. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's going to settle in because for the most part, we've seen a very robust economy. The job numbers are very supportive. More jobs available than there are people to fill them, and record low unemployment. I think you're going to see some fluctuation in the market. We've also seen tremendous, highs. So in terms of just stabilizing it, I think over time, you will see that. And what's interesting is just to see sort of some of the stability now coming in terms of the job approval ratings. And so as a president, he should feel happy that he's got these great numbers in with the Trump more positive poll numbers given the results. So like we've talked about on the show, and Greg, if you said, may not like sort of like the vessel, the delivery system, but he's offering a cure in terms of, the economy and all of the positive growth numbers that we've seen and what he's done with national security and ISIS and whatnot. So we'll have to see where it goes from here, but this is going into an important political time, which is the midterm elections. And that's why I think overall, when you're faced with these kind of good numbers and poll numbers, it's going to be very difficult for the Democrats, to make a strong case for change coming into the midterm elections when things are most auspicious.
Well, it'll be a referendum on one Donald Trump. Don't go anywhere. Our 23andMe DNA results. Stunning and finally here. But first, the fun of the fastest 7 up next with Jesse.
Welcome back. Time for the fastest 7. First up. Last week, we told you about NBC Tonight Show host Jimmy Fallon's feelings of personal regret over a hair-tussling 2016 interaction with then-candidate Donald Trump.
I made a mistake. I'm sorry if I made anyone mad. And looking back, I would do it differently.
The president is now telling Fallon to man up, tweeting, Jimmy Fallon is now whimpering to all that he did the famous hair show with me, where he seriously messed up my hair, and that he would have now done it differently because it is said to have humanized me. He is taking heat. He called and said, monster ratings, be a man, Jimmy. What do you think, Greg?
My favorite part is that after that, Fallon tweeted, like, I'm donating to this charity. And the next tweet was, that's great, Jimmy. But it was from Jimmy's other account that he had. So he was actually congratulating himself, which was kind of funny.
That's never good.
Yeah, that was actually, that didn't work out well.
Be a man, Jimmy. What do you think, Juan?
I don't understand. It seems to me Donald Trump loves to fight somebody and to have somebody to pick on all the time.
Well, he's got plenty of choices.
And he just goes, because Jimmy Fallon actually, he saw a dip in his ratings, and we've seen Stephen Colbert now ahead of Jimmy Fallon. Most likely. I think that's what this is about. But the president loves to get in any schoolyard fight.
And usually wins. All right, Roseanne Barr getting emotional in her first interview since being fired from her namesake show over a racist tweet she sent out about Valerie Jarrett.
I've lost everything, and I regretted it before I lost everything. I am not a racist. I'm an idiot. I am willing to accept whatever consequences this brings because I know I've done wrong.
Meanwhile, ABC is moving on without its big star, announcing last week that it's going forward with a Roseanne-free spinoff show called The Conners. I kind of like that. I'm an idiot. That's what she says.
Right. Well, I think let this be a lesson. Like when you start looking at conspiracy news websites, stop yourself. Get off of them. Do not believe that stuff and move on.
An interesting choice to go on the show. What was this? The Shmuley podcast.
Oh, Rabbi Shmuley.
Yes, Kimberly.
Yes.
What do you think about that choice?
Yes, Kimberly. It has a religious bent to it and connotation. So I think she's saying that, I'm a human being. I made a horrible mistake. I'm very sorry for it. I'm not a racist. But she's saying, look, it was an awful thing to say. She wasn't thinking, so she called herself an idiot. I mean, it's pretty revealing, and she's throwing herself out there. It's the right thing to do, to apologize and to say that it was wrong. She's not trying to justify it. So we'll see how it plays. At least she knows she has said that. And I think that's important for her to have done. Whether it's accepted or believed or not is for the receiver.
What do you think, Juan? You accept her apology?
I believe in repentance. I believe in forgiveness. I'm a Christian, so yes. I'll go for it. But let me just tell you, I think when you go around calling people apes and say, "Oh, I'm not a racist," and that by that standard, nobody's a racist.
Yeah, that's a tough one to recover from in modern day America. Greg?
I forgive everybody. I forgave Joy Reid, Joy Behar. I don't forgive people who advance violence, like Peter Fonda. And I saw a couple of people that when they take pleasure in somebody's career being over. Saw that this morning on Fox News. They had some guests on. I can't think, 2 guys, and they were like laughing that her career was over. And I just thought, you know what? She's paid the price.
There, but for the grace of God, go you.
Yep, it happened to you.
That's true. The internet has dubbed the San Francisco woman Permit Patty after a video posted to Instagram allegedly shows her calling the cops on a young African-American girl selling water to help earn money to go to Disneyland.
This woman don't want to let a little girl sell some water. She calling police on an 8-year-old little girl. You can hide all you want. The whole world gonna see you, boo.
Yeah, and illegally selling water without a permit? Yeah.
On my property.
It's not your property.
The woman, later identified as Allison Edel, says she made a mistake, would like to apologize to the little girl, and offers her rationale for calling the police in an interview on the Today Show.
I tried to be polite, but I was stern. And I said, please, I'm trying to work. You're screaming, you're yelling. And people have open windows. It's a hot day. Can you please keep it down?
Come on, Permit Patty.
This combines everything I hate about life. Permits.
Right.
Permits. Why do we have permits at all? It's stupid. Hall monitors who need to police other people's actions, like her calling this on this poor girl. And then the use of social media to turn a local story into a national one. Communities used to solve these things on their own. Now it's the court of public opinion. Yeah.
What a nerd, right, Dana?
Him?
No.
How dare you?
I agree. I was just thinking, like, this would never have been a story before. And she would never have gone on the Today Show and apologized. And I know it's annoying when you're trying to work and people are yelling outside, but, like, does it really need to be a national news story?
I think it does. I think they should lead every show.
In fact, he just made it one.
That's right. And you know, she knew she was way out of line because she's ducking and hiding from the woman trying to expose her one.
Well, you know, I mean, especially among you guys and conservatives, definitely anti-permit, no question, right? Libertarian.
Deregulation.
Is my libertarian friend.
You should sell everything, loose cigarettes, you name it, you should sell it. I'm
Remember
for
that?
it.
The guy that got choked?
No, I know. Regulations cause more problems.
Like Lucy's or whatever. Right. Permit Patty. She had the name perfect. Not to be confused with Peppermint Patty. We don't want her disparaged.
That's right.
She was well.
They are finally here. Our 23andMe DNA ancestry results are in. I cannot believe it's already causing chaos on the set. Stay tuned.
So it's the moment we've been waiting for. Thanks to 23andMe, we finally all know the truth about our heritage. After spitting into some test tubes and sending them to the lab, we have the DNA results. Enough talk, let's get to it. Greg, do you have any surprises?
Well, it turns out I've been fingered in a dozen unsolved murders. So I have to go. No, this is
Lock him up.
It turns out I'm white. 2%. This is great. I'm a 2% Native American.
Ooh.
Eat your heart out, Liz Warren. My new name will be Rides with Unicorns. But no, the one thing that I am 30% Ashkenazi Jewish, which Gutfeld kind of would have given that away. But that's pretty cool. Do you know that they're like 30%? 30% of all Nobel Prize winners.
Yes.
And 40% of all Oscar-winning directors.
Wow.
So that explains
3%.
a lot.
So maybe we're related.
What did you get?
Children.
You go for it, Kimberly. What do you have?
Okay, so and I've done this before, but this is interesting. Good news is comes back to him. So bottom line is, my father was born in Ireland, right? So that's no surprise that his whole side is Irish and like Scottish, like that. My mother born in Aguadilla in Puerto Rico. So the Puerto Rican side is where it gets interesting. That's Iberian Peninsula, which is Spanish, and it is 9.7% black from like West Africa, East African, North Africa, and then Native American adds up to about 6.1%, a little bit of British on that side as well. So nice little
But it was at 89%,
diversity.
80% European?
European, but that includes Spanish, my Puerto Rican side.
So I was 100% European, hundo P. European. But so my great-grandparents lived in Italy. They came from Italy to Homestead, but I'm only 2.2% Italian. I'm mostly British and Irish, so Peter. No, I guess we have more in common than we thought. And a little French and German. My mom knew that. The Balkan thing, 0.3%.
Wow.
I did not know about that, but the Albanians, I love them. All right. Juan, go ahead.
I love the.
Oh, so you know, I did Ancestry.com before this, but it came back pretty much the same.
Right.
So Ancestry had me mostly from the Benin, Togo, slave trade and all that. This one says 48.8% sub-Saharan African, mostly West African, but then 25% European. British, Iberian. Greg and I do have some things in common.
Yeah, I'm 9% Iberian.
0.2% Ashkenazi Jewish, you know.
Oh, we're all related there.
So whereas Ancestry.com had me like 27, 28% South Asian, this one has me 20% South Asian, more European than South Asian.
It's interesting. Yeah, it is that way.
All right, Jesse's the only one who has not looked until this very moment. So, Jesse.
This is the big reveal.
There you
this is
go.
an authentic reaction.
You got to turn it to the next
Whoa, wait a second. I'm going to read it off the screen. 99.9% European.
Oh, I was Hundo P.
Mostly British.
God, you're French.
And I am a little French.
Me
It
too.
says you're a lot French.
No,
Jesse.
5.9%.
You're more French than I am.
God,
You're
I'm
more
20%
French than I am.
Scandinavian.
No, I'm 30%.
Oh, I'm 0.1% sub-Saharan African. Sweet.
Wait a minute.
So you're related to me and Juan.
Ah,
So when
one big happy family.
when I call you a frat bro, now
Brother from another mother, right?
Pretty
check it out,
interesting
man.
stuff.
Oh my
Pretty
goodness.
interesting. So you see how like people migrate, how people migrated all from around and got to where they are now.
That's a good way of putting
Yes,
it.
okay.
This is astrology for people who like science.
Yes. Now you can pick through it and find out more and more information about your loved ones.
Doesn't
But
it show, though, that overall people are more related than, you might think we all
That
come
is
from
actually, I
different
love that.
places, and I
All
think
right.
that's nice.
Thank you, 23andMe, for that. One more thing is up next.
Feel like a hard to get started when I'm driving, turning every head. Hell, I ain't even trying.
So it's the moment we've been waiting for. Thanks to 23andMe, we finally all know the truth about our heritage. After spitting into some test tubes and sending them to the lab, we have the DNA results. Enough talk, let's get to it. Greg, do you have any surprises?
Well, it turns out I've been fingered in a dozen unsolved murders.
wow, great.
So I have to go. No, this is
Lock him up.
it turns out I'm white. No, 2%. This is great. I'm a 2% Native American.
Ooh.
Eat your heart out, Liz Warren. My new name will be Rides with Unicorns. But no, the one thing that I am, I am 30% Ashkenazi Jewish, which Gutfeld kind of would have given that away. But that's pretty cool. Do you know that they're like 30%? 30% of all Nobel Prize winners.
Yes.
And 40% of all Oscar-winning directors.
Wow.
So that explains
3%.
a lot.
So maybe we're related. in
What did you
bizarre
get?
Children.
You go for it, Kimberly.
Yeah,
What do you have?
Okay, so and I've done this before, but this is interesting. Good news is comes back to him. So bottom line is, my father was born in Ireland, right? So that's no surprise that his whole side is Irish and like Scottish, like that. My mother born in Aguadilla in Puerto Rico. So the Puerto Rican side is where it gets interesting. That's Iberian Peninsula, which is Spanish, and it is 9.7% black from like West Africa, East African, North Africa, and then Native American adds up to about 6.1%, a little bit of British on that side as well. So nice little
But I said 89%,
diversity.
80% European? Is that what I said?
European, but that includes Spanish, my Puerto Rican side.
So I
no,
was
my dad's.
100% European, Hundo P. European.
Hundo P.
But so my great-grandparents lived in Italy. They came from Italy to Homestead, but I'm only 2.2% Italian.
Oh, you're
I'm
French.
mostly British and Irish, so Peter. Oh, I guess we have more in common than we thought. And a little French and German. My mom knew that. The Balkan thing, 0.3%.
Wow.
I did not know about that, but the Albanians, I love them. All right. Juan, go ahead.
I love the.
Oh, so I did Ancestry.com before this, but it came back pretty much the same.
Right.
So Ancestry had me mostly from the Benin, Togo, slave trade and all that. This one says 48.8% sub-Saharan African, mostly West African, but then 25% European, British, Iberian. Greg and I do have some things in common.
Yeah, I'm 9% Iberian.
0.2% Ashkenazi Jewish,
We're all related there.
So whereas Ancestry.com had me like 27, 28% South Asian, this one has me 20% South Asian, more European than South Asian.
It's interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is that way.
All right, Jesse's the only one who has not looked until this very moment. So, Jesse,
This is the big reveal.
There you
This is
go.
an authentic reaction.
you got to turn it to the next page.
Whoa, wait a second. I'm going to read it off the screen. 99.9% European.
Oh, I was Hundo P.
Mostly British.
God, you're French.
And I am a little French.
Me
It
too.
says you're a lot French.
No,
Jesse.
5.9%.
You're more French than I am.
God,
You're
I'm
more
20%
French than I am.
Scandinavian.
No, I'm 30%.
Oh, I'm 0.1% sub-Saharan African. Sweet.
Wait a
So
minute.
you're related to me and Juan.
So when
One big happy family.
when I call you a frat bro, now
Brother from another mother, right?
Pretty
check it out,
interesting
man.
stuff.
Oh my
There it
goodness.
is.
Interesting.
Jesse.
So you see how people migrate, how people migrated all from around and got to where they are now.
That's a good way of putting
Yes,
it.
okay.
This is astrology for people who like science.
Yes. Now you can pick through it and find out more and more information about your loved ones.
Doesn't it show, though, that overall people are more related than, you might think we all
That
come
is
from
actually, I
different
love that.
places, and I
All
think
right.
that's nice.
Thank you, 23andMe, for that. One more thing is up next.
Feel like a hard to get